super hot. I'm like, I sit on my lap, and I'm like, I can't even use this thing.
Yep.
Is your internet working okay?
Okay, great.
Seems to be.
I just need to reconnect it.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. We're here for our Town of Danvers Planning Board meeting. Today is Tuesday, November 26, 2024. We're here at the Danvers Senior Center. So I'm here, my name is Louis George, I'm the chair. I'm here with, to my left is Jean Hartnett, who's our clerk. To her left is Mike DeCoulis. To my right is Jim Sears and Tim Spittle. And Josh Morris from town staff is here as well. So why don't we begin with our first agenda item is Maple Square, 128 Maple Street. It's a sign package presentation to the planning board, which is a condition of the site plan decision. And so do we have someone here? And you come to the podium and introduce yourself and you can give your presentation.
Gary Bolduc with a Metro Sign and Awning.
Could you speak up? And
Gary Bolduc with Metro Sign and Awning. We're working with the construction company, Opeachy, and AAM 15, the developer, for this property. And we are building the sign cabinets. I think there's a total of 5 of them at different entrances. We would just be fabricating the cabinets to go over various entrances. And right now, there'd just be blank faces, white polycarb faces. They're still leasing, so they're not even sure who will be going in there. The developer has also requested doing black awnings versus, I think initially they were red, but now they'd like to do black, so we're seeking approval for this.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
And that's basically it.
Okay. Before we come back to the board with any questions, just asking staff,
Yep.
Josh, can you give just a little bit of
Yep.
an introduction in terms of
Yes.
what this, sort of where this came about? Because I think this was a condition
That's
from the
right.
site plan decision.
That's right. So I'll read the condition. It was one of the administrative conditions from the project when it was originally approved in May or June of 2022. And the condition reads, the applicant and/or property owner shall present the sign package of the project to the planning board prior to installation. So that's what's before us tonight.
Now, you mentioned something about an awning as well. So what's like awning color?
Yep. So that's shown on the plans.
Okay.
I have large prints as well if you'd like, but they're shown here, the black awnings.
Now, is there I know there was a condition in terms of the original approval in terms of that there be awnings, but there wasn't any with respect to color, was there?
No, and there wasn't a condition regarding the awnings either, but
I thought that was. I thought that was added to the. Okay.
but I think, as the property owners, developers earlier in the week mentioned that they are interested in potentially changing the original awning color. So I said, well, you folks are coming to the meeting on Tuesday. Why don't we, at least show the board the whole thing? So that's why I thought it would be beneficial just to talk about the whole facade all at once.
And the sign approval, is that something that's typically done with it? That's administratively that's done with?
So the planning office, one of my actually both Brian's in the office review signage, and so what they do is they review once the sign permit is submitted to the building department. The planning office reviews the signs for zoning purposes, and then we tell the building department, yes, it's yay or nay, and then so this tonight isn't necessarily the planning board approving or disproving the signs and the awnings. It's just simply the developer presenting the signs and the awnings.
And if the members if we have questions,
of
obviously,
course.
it's not a public hearing, but if we have questions, we can ask.
Of course.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right, thanks for the background. Turn things over to the board. Jim, do you have any questions or comments?
On the curved facade above the entranceway, what's the material that's going to comprise that?
The cabinet is actually aluminum. It's a standard sign cabinet. It's basically painted black aluminum frame with white polycarb faces or Lexan faces. And then we'd be applying for text. It would probably be vinyl that we apply to the face, but we still don't know what that is. The text is even going to be right now.
Okay. There's not going to be any like bronze or brass or anything to kind of jazz it up a little, the entranceway?
That wasn't in the plan.
Okay, okay. So it's just, we think that's going to be that's the main entranceway? Do we think that's going to be kind of an address?
Yeah,
Or
it's
a
probably
name?
going to be something like the name of the property, address, something like that. We're not even sure yet.
Okay, and then the awning color, did we state what that's going to be? Is that going to be black?
It's going to be black per these drawings. Initially, it was, I think, a red, and they're asking if they could get black instead.
Consistent throughout, so they'll all be black?
They will all be black.
Okay.
And that will tie in, I think, to the black cabinets as well.
And no signage on the awnings?
No,
Just on the building per commercial space? if you will?
correct, yep.
Will there be further signage for name of the building on the sides of each building that front a street, if you will? So you have one in the middle there, and then on the other each
Yeah, we're not
side.
addressing it tonight, but there are going to be banners. You can see right there, banners at each corner of the building, I believe they've asked for. But they're still developing the banners. So they didn't want to, they just need approval for the cabinets and the awnings at this point because of time frame.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have.
Okay. Tim?
Yeah, the signs against the wall, if we can go to that other page for a second. Am I understanding correctly that it's the tenant space, it says that it's electrified, so there's internal illumination.
Mm-hmm.
Is the whole face, does light come through the whole face, or how should I understand the tenant?
Yeah, there's a white plex or polycarb face that illuminates, and then you would have the text on top of that. So it really depends how much, text they have or graphics they have. But it is a white illuminated face.
Okay. Question for Josh. The section in the zoning regulations on illumination doesn't seem to talk about, like it talks about backlit letters, but not having exposed neon. It has a bunch of very specific language, but nothing about this. It strikes me that lots of light coming out. I mean, I could imagine a more attractive sign than just a big white box of light. How do I understand the zoning regulations with respect to internal illumination of lights?
Well, if when our office reviews this, when it's submitted and it doesn't, when our office reviews the sign permit, if it doesn't meet the language in the zoning regulations, then a building permit won't be granted unless a variance is requested and granted. So it would have to meet the language.
Okay. That's it for me. Thanks.
Okay,
Okay.
sure.
Jean?
Yeah. You might not have control over this, but any idea of like the hours of the signs being on? Like, are they individually controlled or?
They can be. I
Okay.
would have to look into the regulations, but there are time clocks that we can apply to the cabinets that,
Okay.
Shut off at 11 at night,
Okay.
start up again at 6 in the morning, something like that.
All right. That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Mike?
Josh, just in terms of like the aesthetic, kind of off Jim and Tim's comments, like, do we have any comments on that, just in terms of like the polycarbonate versus like a different type of sign, or is that not really in our purview?
Once again, if it meets the regulations, that's essential. Not necessarily design discretion,
Okay.
but if it meets it, then it will be granted. If it doesn't, then
Okay.
it doesn't.
Okay. My comments were just going to be, it'd be nice to have like a little more of a higher quality sign. I actually just finished a project that Metro Sign just did all the signage at recently, and they did a great job, and it was more like metal cutout, like die cast, like letters on like pins and stuff like that, and it was really nice. So my comments were just, I just think we could do something a little nicer than the polycarbonate, but if we don't have have a say in that, then I guess it is what it is. And then my other question.
Sorry to cut you off. Not to put Craig on the spot from AAM 15. I think he's on the call or the meeting. Craig, if you want to just unmute yourself potentially, just kind of comment potentially on how the signs, or Gary, I don't know if it
Last
was.
name for the record as
Yep.
well?
He's
I
on
think
mute right
Chris
now.
was going to be on with AAM 15.
Yeah, okay, yep. I wasn't sure, Gary, if the design for the signs was driven by Metro or if it was driven by AM 15, or if you could kind of.
Yeah, it was initially developed by AM 15.
Okay.
And I'm just basically here to represent how we make them and, what's included with materials and stuff like that. But I believe it has been shown before. I wasn't part of the design.
Yep.
Josh, is there someone in, is
There-
there some,
There was Craig Piffensteel. Craig, if you're there and you could hear, I guess if you could just kind of comment on the signs. He's just muted right now. That's all. That's the problem.
okay. All right, so he's on, but he might not be active.
So
Okay.
I can't unmute him. Or
Okay. Mike, do you have any further questions? or
My other
or
comment was
general
just,
comments?
is there, I know you said that there's banner signage and stuff. Are you guys also doing like all the building address signage and like fire department sign? Like, is there a total signage package that we're going to also see, or are we just looking at the?
We're just
tenant
looking at the
signage?
cabinets and the awnings
But
tonight.
will that be part of?
But yes, we have to work with the ADA regulations and fire department.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Okay. I have a couple of questions for you, just in terms of the, in terms of some of the signage. Now, now I know obviously you're still in the process in terms of signing tenants and such. So until that occurs, so if the signs are up, especially the white, sort of it seems like these white signs, will they be on and frankly blank until tenants are there, or they will be sort of up but not illuminated, so you're not just going to see some white light.
Yeah, I would think until they have at least and they occupy the space, they wouldn't need to be illuminated.
Okay. In terms of some of the banners as well, and I know I see in terms of the plans, it lists, logo here. I mean, is that anticipated that would be would that be the name of the building? Would that be Maple Square? Is that going to be the main tenant? What would that be anticipated to be?
I think it's going to be the property name, like Maple Square and the whatever logo they have. That's still being developed right now, but we can certainly show you what it will be. We just don't know right now.
Right. And so that would be intended to be is that would that be a permanent sign on a banner? Or
Yes, there'll be two, like there'll be an arm at the top and at the bottom. The banners could be changed out in the future, but I think they're looking to open up the building in the spring. So the banners haven't even been really addressed yet.
But they would be sort of banners for they'd be banners to identify the building, or they wouldn't be necessarily like, now leasing or that sort of.
Not that I know of.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Just as was brought out, I mean, I think the concern is that you've got these lit white signs and, you've probably been through downtown. We have a Hong Kong restaurant and it's a yellow backing. I'm not sure that ever goes off.
There's a new. If you notice, it's a new sign.
Yeah. Well, I'm just wondering where we have this new
Right.
building and what is to stop whatever new restaurant that goes in there, because there's a restaurant space, saying, well, let's put a red sign, and then we got a white sign over here. While we have that downtown already, in the building that has the tattoo shop and used to be Kumon, there's different lit signs. We want to create some type of uniformity. I know we don't have a design review board, but, does this give us an opportunity to kind of make something look classy and not get, at least in my opinion, where someone comes in and says, well, we don't want the white backing, let's make it bright yellow. I mean, I don't know what the rest of the board thinks, or the staff on that, because I'm not sure. Like I said, we do have guidelines, for Maple Square and all the guidelines for the newer zoning that we put in, but I'm
Right.
not sure if it goes to the level of that detail as to, do we want lit signs? Do we not want lit signs? Do we want to keep them all the same color at least, and/or, have some type of baseline to start with where we have a brand new building?
Uniformity of some nature, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, if you go to Stamford, Connecticut, every awning is Hunter Green downtown. Every single awning has to be Hunter Green. And we're not Stamford, Connecticut, but, what do we want the downtown to look like? This is an opportunity to maybe work with the board's opinion and/or staff to establish, classy signage, because again, once the developer's done, now you've got a landlord, and maybe we want to encourage someone to go in there and they get their sign package, and we don't have any requirements because it's kind of Wild West right now.
Yeah, I would think they could write that into their lease. Basically, you can only do this color. But I think as far as the regulations with the building department, I don't know if that's specified right now.
I don't think it is either,
Yeah.
because we don't have that. We used to have downtown, we'd had downtown board that would review what signage and stuff going to downtown. Like, for example, if you put a retail, one of those commercial spaces is retail, say it was a small store or pharmacy, they would be limited as to what they could put in the glass window. They would get one sign on the building, but I don't think we have that presently.
Yeah.
Right. Correct.
I
I guess what I'm, not to summarize, it seems like there definitely seems to be some commentary from the board about maybe the development team being open to potentially some type of change with the signage, just as a recommendation or a comment in terms of
There's definitely concern about uniformity. I think that's certainly.
uniformity and even the internally lit
materials.
piece.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I mean, the uniformity is like baseline to me.
Right.
I think beyond that, like, just nicer signage. I mean, it's this new building in Danvers. I think it would be really nice to have some high-quality sign, not just a plastic backlit. And I know we have it in other places, and I know we can't control that, but I do think if we can do something a little nicer, personally, I think it would just be a benefit to a new building, but.
Sure.
Well, is there a need for the backlit signs? Is there enough lighting on the buildings to light the signs? And, do we need a backlit sign?
Well, you might have to do something externally lit. I just know that was what was designed initially.
Okay.
So I know the building's going up now, and we've measured the space out, and
So you've got it all conduit or wired for that
yeah, that's already been done, but
So-
we're just looking for approval to go ahead with this.
But it could even be like an internally lit sign rather than the plastic polycarbonate, and it's just a little more attractive. I mean, you guys have done that before.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what face we put in the cabinet.
Right, yeah.
So, we can look at that.
Yeah.
Do you want to work with staff?
Just,
to accomplish the goal?
Yeah, so is that something, can the applicant, can you all work with staff to, you're hearing the concerns that
Right.
we have from today in terms of, I think it's uniformity, it's materials, it's sort of
Right.
it's having a less of a generic and more of a, for lack of a better word, more of like a classy look to the signage. And is that something, can you work with staff about, in terms of to implement that?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, we've got the space that we need to work with, so we'd like the approval to build the cabinets, but then we can work with staff on what goes on the face of the sign.
I think the face of the sign as well as even, I think what Mike was saying, sort of the backing of the sign area, isn't that right?
It's a
Yeah.
personal
Yeah.
opinion that I know we don't have control
Yeah.
over, but I do just think there'd be nicer ways to do this. But that's just, again, my feelings on it. So if you were going to do something, you couldn't build the cabinet, so that wouldn't be giving them approval. But again, I don't know that we have any control over that. So that's up to them if they want to work with staff, I think. But Josh could probably comment more on that.
Yeah, I mean, so Craig from AM15, who unfortunately seems like he's having just some technical difficulty with his audio.
Could you
I'd be
speak
happy.
up, Josh?
Yep, sorry. Craig, who is trying to jump on the call and I think trying to comment, but his audio appears to just be an issue. I'd be happy to meet with Craig and the representative from Metro, Gary, to kind of talk through some of these kind of items that have been brought up tonight. And maybe the applicant developer would be open to, some modifications or some of the recommendations or comments that have come from tonight. And maybe we could, obviously this is a very visible project.
Yeah.
It's a brand new, highly visible. We want it to be, a high class, project. So I think that, these.
So would they be willing to work with staff and then,
Yeah,
and come back before the board?
but potentially, it's hard for me to say all these things without AM 15 representative agreeing, but they have been a very amenable, good. We've had a very good relationship to this point, just in terms of the operations of the day to day and the construction, and so I think that a conversation on the signage piece, I think, would be appropriate, and I think that they would be open to it without them having the opportunity to say yes, they would definitely do that. I think that they would.
Okay.
Yep.
So I guess where it stands then is the applicant would work, I guess, through, with AM 15 and work with town staff about, addressing some of these concerns, and are we looking up, and then could we,
Yeah.
have them come back?
Sure.
When would your next meeting be? That
December 10th.
okay? Yeah, I need to straighten that out with them because we're
Sure.
just worried about time frame right
Of
now,
course.
which
Yep.
I need to work out.
Mhm.
I mean, in terms of my fellow board members, any thoughts in terms of that approach, or?
No, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So this is not a public hearing. I do notice that we have a member of the public who has a question, so I can, as chair, I can entertain a couple of questions. So why don't you go to the podium? Yeah, I see Nova Samadai as well. What's that? Okay.
What's that?
Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. Are cabinets the only way to identify businesses inside? Are there other options available for illuminating or recognizing the business? I know in some areas it's been directional lights, not flooding the area with lighting. And obviously no outside audio. I've heard that before. Not for this, but I've heard that before. But I'd just be interested to know if there are other options for the builder to identify the different businesses.
Okay. I'll leave that to the applicant. I think that he indicated the answer was yes, but
That's the only option
no,
available.
I'm saying yes, that there are other options.
Okay, that's what I would be concerned. See some kind of a presentation, a picture perhaps of the different variants that could be used by
I
the
think what
developer.
he was saying, and I want to put words, you can, Bonnie, come up and address his question, but I think that he indicated that there were other options, but I think they're also constrained by the current construction as well.
Yes, correct. There's a certain amount of space there that's already built into the building, so we need to work with that. You can certainly do like individual letters versus a cabinet, things like that, but this has all been shown preliminarily, so I'm not sure where we're at this point, like what we can change. Because materials have been ordered and I need to work with that, but there's other things that you can do. Like you had mentioned, you can use other materials.
Right.
And just to confirm, you could do like a raceway which use the same conduit you have. You could have a raceway, and then you could have like internally illuminated light, like individual letters. Just would be a nicer sign than a polycarbonate, right? Like that's something.
You could do halo lit letters,
Yeah, okay.
base lit letters.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Do you have a follow-up? Ms. Samade has a question too.
My only, again, Bill Bradstreet, my only concern is, at this stage of the game, that the building is now talking about signage, to me, should have been discussed when the project was first started, so comments could have been made so that, as the gentleman said, this is what they have now. What could have been developed from the beginning to identify the different businesses, not, this is what we're,
Right.
I don't want to use nasty, we're stuck with this because it was, now it's built and this is what we have to do, as opposed to on day one, this is what we'd like to build, this is what we'd like to put in for signage. Does anybody have any suggestions? It sounds like it's a little late for that.
I think in terms of this, I mean, that this was included as a condition to the site plan review. So this was anticipated that that signage would be something that would come back to us before we had the final, before things were finalized, and that's why we're having this conversation as well. So that they will take some of our suggestions, and working with town staff again, which has, administrative review of signs to try to address some of those concerns.
I know you as a board of the town is trying to do the best they can, but to me, as one of your members said, you'd like something classy, and to me, it could have been developed or spoken about or put into the scheme of things from the beginning, not at this stage of the building. That's my concern. Thank you.
I hear what you're saying. Nova, want you to identify yourself and?
Nova Salmon, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. I'm in agreement with everyone that these are not my favorite signs. I would definitely like to see something classier. It is a brand new building, which is got all kinds of comments on it, as is. So let's try and pick it up, especially the front curved frontage. The fact that that's going to have the same kind of sign for the permanent address or whatever it is seems very strange. It seems like those should be individual address or something, but to have a curved facade and have it be one of those white backlit signs just seems really low end. I do want to comment that I am happy with the change in the awnings to the black instead of red. That's great. I'm hoping it's a quality fabric that doesn't fade in a year and then look terrible. So that's it. But yes, if we can change these signs at all, that would be great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay. Anything else from our board members? Josh, was there anything else that was received from?
No.
Okay, so then I guess the applicant will be working with town staff and.
I will. I'll reach out to Craig and Gary. I'll try and set up a meeting the next week, so as soon as possible.
Okay, and then with the idea of coming back to us, or?
Yes, that would be
For-
the goal, or right.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, our next agenda item is and this is actually an informal review here, and this is a concept plan for Putnam Pantry, 255 Newbury Street, and the Israel Putnam House at 431 Maple Street. And Josh, did you want to give us a quick introduction in terms of the this is an informal presentation. This is not a present application.
Yeah, so this is not a formal application, which is usually customary, what we generally do at these meetings. This is an informal, I think, for the property owner
Good, I
to
have it
just receive some
Oh. Okay, thanks.
some feedback just on the concept. I still think of the preliminary or middle preliminary stage. This is an official application. This isn't an official. No,
See, this is not an official application.
this is not an official application. There's been no zoning, discussed, like the process, what the process would be for this particular project. But it's just to get sort of what we just did in the previous item, sort of commentary, suggestions, overall thoughts, high-level thoughts, I think, but not to speak for the team, but that's what I thought this was for.
All right. Excellent. Well, it sounds great. So I guess the applicant or actually this is not an application, the presenter can identify yourself.
Sure. I'm Eric Emerson. I'm accompanied by my sister Wendy and my cousin Jamie. So Wendy and I have involvement in both sides of this, so there's actually two commercial parcels involved. It shows as one, which is the big L, but it's actually two. It was subdivided quite a number of years ago. And then the other is, and those are commercial parcels, and they're held by a realty trust, of which my father's 4 children, which would include me, are the beneficiaries. And the 5th beneficiary, and they're all equal, is the General Israel Putnam Homestead Trust, who owns the other acre. Ultimately, the trust would all revert to the General Israel Putnam Homestead Trust, and it will become the sole beneficiary. So, all 3 of us sit on the Board of Trustees for the General Israel Putnam Homestead Trust as well. So we thought it was appropriate to address this comprehensively because of the long-term objectives. I mean, the long-term objectives are historical. You're all familiar with the house. It's the oldest house in Danvers. It has probably the birthplace of the most famous resident of Danvers. And so we've now assumed responsibility for figuring out what to do with it going forward, which is as we can see from the problems happening in the Highlands, is no small challenge. So you have to come up with an adaptive reuse. The house, although it's sound, probably needs $1 million in restoration over the next 10, 12 years. Although there is an endowment, you have to come up with a way for these properties to make money. Otherwise, you end up with the same situation you have in the Highlands. They go away, which would be a shame. So we're committed to finding that way. The commercial property for the last 150 years has supported the house in one form or fashion. So it was originally one parcel, and the rent from Putnam Pantry paid for the upkeep of the house. So it's not much different than that, other than the dollar challenges are a multiple of that now. So having taken all that in, we have to, what's the adaptive reuse, and how do we maximize it to achieve the objective, which is ultimately historical, and do it in a way that would be most beneficial to the town, that we as a family would be proud of. We'll be dead by then, but someone will be alive still. So, we've come up with a plan which envisions what we think might ultimately happen, although it will likely happen in phases. And so the primary use of the Putnam House and the property would be a centerpiece for events. So that wouldn't take away from the historical aspects of it. The house would have, it's been kind of neglected under the Historical Society's stewardship, not intentionally, but that's the way it ended up. And we took the house back 3 years ago and have been working since then to figure out exactly how we're going to do this. So we thought it would be a good idea to get in front of you folks to get your feedback, to see if there's anything that concerned you, so that when we turn around and come back with what will be probably phase 1 of a formal application, then we're less likely to be surprised, and you're less likely to be surprised. So how we envision that most likely happening is that.
Hello, Mr. Emerson. There's a pointer you could just to help you out. In front of near your microphone is a pointer that you could use on the podium. Sorry.
Just because to make sure as you speak, you want to be close to the microphone, so people at home can hear you.
Oh, okay. All right, great. Okay. So what we would expect the first phase to be would be that the house itself would be used for small gatherings, likely under 50 people, would be for, small events, showers, that type of thing. And that there'd be an outdoor space that would have a tent, which would allow us to do larger gatherings during the, when the weather was favorable. And if that was successful, then we proceed with probably, so that would be this area here. We envision that we would need a small addition to meet some handicap requirements, mostly for handicap restrooms, to service both inside and out. And if that was, to accompany that, we'd need some additional parking, which would be this area. And if that was successful, then we'd envision a more substantial change, which would be a post and beam barn, which would house larger events, probably 150 type, that level. There is available space in the property, so we show a placeholder for an additional business. Don't know what it would be, but obviously it would be very sensitive to anything else we put on the property to make sure it was harmonious and compatible with the historic aspect of it. The property itself would be made more available to the public. As you see, we have it interconnected. We envision informational kiosks. We've actually gone and sat with Richard Trask to ask for his input as to what we'd say on them. A picnic area, which we show right here. The property has not been particularly accessible for the last 20 years. We'd like to make it a lot more accessible. Early on, we basically excluded a museum as the use. It's just not economically feasible. But there are a lot of interesting architectural elements to the house, and so that makes it an interesting place to have an event. And there'd also be opportunities for private tours, that type of thing. We have not had any substantial discussions with code enforcement. Jamie is an architect, so he gets to do all that. We'll probably approach that next. We've had some preliminary feedback from him on some things. It's it's an old house, so it's a challenge. So that's we tried to put everything down here. I think it's probably one of the greener proposals you're apt to see. I think if we do all of this, we'd be at about 40% of what would be allowed for coverage. So, highest and best use of this is not what we're presenting here. That's, if that was our objective, we'd be here a little bit different way. So, that's it. I'll open up to your questions.
Sounds great. Thanks for the presentation. I'm just going to mention just at the outset, just because you mentioned the Historical Society, I currently serve on the board of the Danvers Historical Society, but as you mentioned, the society has not had an interest in the property for several years now. So I just wanted to.
I think it's just about 3 years now.
Yeah, I just wanted to let.
We haven't.
In the interest of
done much.
Disclosure.
We did some mold remediation, things like that. But what we don't want to do is do something and have to redo it.
Sure.
Right, so I think actually later on this month we're replacing one section of the cedar roof, and then we'll do a few things outside just to make it weather tight.
Okay.
And then it's just really based on how fast we can move along with our plans and approvals.
Before I go and just ask the board for their questions, and just a general, I know you said it's more phases. When do you anticipate, in terms of the timeline, sort of the first phase to begin, or
Well, I mean, at this point, that things move fairly slowly.
Okay.
So if we did an event a year from June, I think that would probably be pretty aggressive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So there's some infrastructure work that has to be done to support possible future additions. We want to do that all now and not be, ripping up stuff in the future. The current plans call for the driveway to be cobblestone, so the last thing we want to do is have to rip that up to put in utilities.
Okay.
Right, so we'd probably want to get to the point where we're comfortable enough to stub those in if we wanted to put in that driveway, because that's not a small expense there either. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I'll turn it over to the board for questions. Why don't we start with Mike? If you have any questions or comments, or this is sort of an informal discussion.
Yeah, a comment and a question, I guess. My first comment is I think it's great that you guys are doing something historical and with the property. I'm a huge advocate for that, so I'm support you guys on that big time. My comment I guess I had was for the proposed barn, if you talked about 150 people for events and stuff, would you bus people in for parking, or what would be the plan in that situation? It seems like there's probably not parking for all those people, right?
Well, we could certainly put more parking on the property than we show here.
Okay.
We're trying to maintain the flavor of this was, for 300 years, this was a farmhouse,
Yeah.
right? So we don't show any substantial parking on the Putnam property per se. So it'd all be done with a cross easement with the commercial property. And then, as I mentioned, ultimately, the 501c3 owns all the property, right? But that's all according to the terms of the Realty Trust.
Thank you.
Any further? Or for now?
Good. Yeah, thanks for now.
Tim?
No questions. I think this is a great proposal. Look forward to seeing you again.
Jim?
Yeah, like Mike mentioned, my biggest concern is if you're having a lot of events, if it does become, successful as you plan, which I think it would be great, I don't think you have enough parking if you're having activities in the barn, activities in the house, activities in the restaurant, activities in the rear building, which I'm not sure what the purpose for that is going to be, the proposed building. So best case scenario, you've got, say, 100 spaces shown. Do we want to put some parking spaces in reserve? With parking, we've got stormwater management. We also, I would think, you would want to have all your people coming through the Newbury Street entrance and not on your new cobblestone driveway. So that's going to be a lot of people coming in a 30-foot wide access point off a kind of a busy confluence of people coming off the ramp at the same time trying to turn into your spot. As people are coming in, you've got a lot of movement in that tight spot, and you might have a lot of people coming in and coming out as the event time starts or stops. So I'm just, that's a concern that I have, and just wondering how you would handle it. You don't have to answer that now because it's not a formal presentation, but I think it's something that, you have to have so many people accounted for as employees working in the restaurant, working at these catered functions, and, where's your employee parking, where your guest parking, and I'm just a little concerned about that.
Okay. Well, we have had preliminary discussions with Hancock, and their calculations show that a traffic study we won't trigger a traffic study with the uses that we're contemplating. But, that's an informal review on their part. Now, I understand that it's not the best egress. Surprisingly, and I've been on this property since I was in first grade. I grew up in the Putnam House. There's not a lot of accidents that you'd think that there would have been accidents there. They have not been, surprisingly. So it's imperfect, and yeah, if we were holding events, we probably wouldn't want people using the driveway as a throughway anyhow. So we would contemplate blocking it off, at least partially. And yeah, parking is a concern. And Hancock, based on what we proposed here, did some initial calculations, and we would be under requirements. That's why we,
Under the parking requirements?
yep,
Okay.
yep. It wasn't by a lot, and we could add parking, but we're trying to balance this, right? So.
Yeah, I think you need to be prepared to answer those questions as, how many people, if it's all fully built out, right? How many employees, how many seats in
Yeah.
the restaurant? If you're adding tents, which are not structures, so we're not counting per se those, you know what I mean? If it's truly a temporary tent, that's not really something we normally would count versus a building, right? So I'm just hopeful that, great, you have 200 people on site one day for various events going on.
Yeah.
It's not Endicott Park. I don't know if you can handle that, all that traffic at once. That's a concern.
Yeah, well, I do understand the concern. We do have signed kind of some offsetting requirements because we have, the parking for Putnam Pantry and the business cycles for that is probably not the same as for events, because events would tend to be at night. And our peak business is early afternoon for the existing. So do we ever fill our current parking lot? Sure. But that's the exception. We'll do it around holidays. We have some events there where we can't fit all the parking now that, when we do the benefit for, we do the ice cream for breakfast, which is a benefit. We make it a benefit, and I don't know how we fit all the people in because it's a mob scene, but, these things sometimes find a way to work themselves out too. But I understand there's statutory requirements. We may be looking for some moderate relief on those.
Okay. Jean, do you have any comments or questions?
I think this is a great proposal. I'm happy that you are maintaining the historic home. Just also echo what they say about parking. I don't know, maybe you could do some sort of like the bricks that have the infiltration if you need extra on the grass, maybe. Something like that.
Yeah.
But what are you doing with the restaurant? Is it going to be closed, or are you keeping it open?
What's that? Putnam Pantry?
Yeah.
No, Putnam Pantry is showing here will be expanded.
Oh, great. So
Yeah.
it's not closing.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're at next year will be 74 years. So the following year will be 75 years. So that's we don't have any plans to close the Putnam Pantry.
That's even better news.
That being said, if you want to come up and support us, go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think I have any other questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So
Yeah, just a few questions, and I think this is a great, I'm excited about this, in terms of this plan and the historic piece of it, and I think you've done your, family proud. I know your dad passed away recently, and that's, I think it's a nice legacy.
he was very interested in this, particularly in the last year, and in moving this along.
Yeah.
So, putting a plan in front of him was important, but he kind of inherited the responsibility from his uncles and aunt,
Sure.
and so he was kind enough to pass it on to us.
That's a that's a great legacy. I mean, some of the concerns I have, again, just as in terms of, that I know has been articulated already in terms of parking, and maybe if there's a way, if you are seeking, if you are seeking relief, and I understand in terms of the concerns of sort of it's a balancing in terms of the, keeping the historical nature of the property and just having a bunch of blacktop, which I don't think is
Yeah.
great. But, I'm not sure if there's a way that you can even, in terms of, I think was even mentioned earlier in terms of, potentially even if you have a large event busing people in, if you're able to have any arrangements with neighboring properties, make an agreement where you're able to have even a staging and then
Yeah.
drive people in. I think that potentially could help, at least ease some concerns about parking. That's something that might be, worth looking into.
Yeah, we had talked about that. There is some churn in the ownership in the area, so we don't know quite who our neighbors are going to be.
Sure.
So, the Village Green property is, I'm not sure that there's any firm understanding of what's happening there. That would be a natural, because there's quite a bit of parking there, but, I knew that it's going to be an auto dealership, and now it's not.
Right.
So I'm actually glad it's not a auto dealership, but I don't know what it's going to be.
Okay.
And
But again, I think that's something just to look at those sort of options, because you hear some of the concerns, we have just in terms of, potential parking and
Yeah.
circulation and that sort of thing. A question I had also as well, I know you mentioned adaptive reuse. In terms of would you need to or would you need to seek relief under the adaptive reuse bylaw at
I
all?
don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think, it's highway corridor.
Mm-hmm.
It's, right now, the use is residential,
Right.
right? So, we don't want to switch to commercial until we need to,
Sure.
obviously. And we haven't really had any formal discussions with code enforcement. We're talking about a 350-year-old house with 6 foot 2 inch ceilings, right? And so that's going to be it's going to be a maze to navigate.
Okay.
So we're not, and that, which is why we contemplate limiting it probably to less than 50 people, because you get over 50 people, then the restrictions,
Sure.
as I understand it, become quite a bit more daunting.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good stop to make in
Yeah.
terms of code enforcement and make sure.
And
that
really,
we're-
for the house to do events would it would be put too much stress on the house.
Right.
We could do a tent with 100 people outside.
Sure.
I don't know if anyone has been by there. We didn't know exactly what we were doing in the house till we get done with this, but we know what we want the property look like, so we've landscaped a lot of it. It was a jungle, as you know, and so we've started that to give us a glimmer of hope.
Sounds- Let's see, I don't have any further questions on my end here. Josh, any questions from town staff, sort of what, is this, what's sort of the next step in the process?
Probably just as the plans, begin to become more kind of final, and the closer you kind of feel the development team that they're close to, this is what we potentially want to do. Obviously, we're very happy to meet with you, and
Well, that's the next step, right? So we wanted to make sure that the path we were taking didn't have any outright objections. Then we'll follow up with code enforcement and, start showing some details so that when we come back, we already have a pretty good, clear understanding of what we're up against there, financially as well.
Sure.
At this point, there is, moving it along as quickly as possible is important, because we don't bring in any income until we get to a certain point.
Sure.
Okay.
Very good. Any other questions from the board? This is not a public hearing, but I do see a hand raised by a member of the public, but if they want to Chair's prerogative. I'll
Me
allow
again.
that question.
Nova Seminole Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. I'm really excited about this. This is great. I'm curious through the chair, would they be able to just use grass as parking for extra and like not actually have pave when they needed it? And if like people didn't want to park on grass for shoes or something like that, they could do valet?
Right.
I don't know if that's even allowed. So that's my question. And also, I wasn't sure if they had thought, because it's highway corridor, there's lots of traffic and everything, do they have any plans to really kind of block the property from all of that noise and traffic, like, I don't know, some kind of walling or trees or anything like that? I'm just thinking about the people or like renting the space.
At an event, you mean?
At an event, and the people renting the space going, it's kind of loud, or there's a loud traffic. Sorry.
Well, can I just ask, it was a two-part question. I just want to go in, just in terms of the grass parking. Josh, any thoughts in terms of that? I mean, that wouldn't be a permanent parking.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know in the bylaw if that would.
Could you speak up?
Yeah, I don't know in reviewing the bylaw, I'm not sure that, those types of kind of temporary spaces would count per se, but I could look into it further, but my gut feeling is probably not, like, without diving into it too hard.
Right,
but-
so I think, I guess what you're saying is that, without diving into it, would not necessarily be able to count for their spaces. So I guess, is that something that could be considered like if they are seeking less than the parking and they're seeking any sort of relief, they would have to address measures such as potential shuttle or limited
Right.
parking elsewhere on the
I
property?
kind of think of a situation like this with the grass in sort of a way that it could be kind of, you could look at it as like a sort of type of reserve type situation, right? Like in the future, or if the property owner and or the town or over time is like, we really need these 10, 15 spaces. This isn't functioning, right? Like this probably really needs to be converted from the grass to the pavement.
Okay.
That's kind of how I view this type of situation.
Gotcha. Jim, did you have any thoughts on that? I know because you had mentioned the parking.
Yeah, I mentioned reserve, but I
Yeah.
mean, if you do reserve, then you get, that all goes part of your stormwater management,
Mm.
because you can't, if you say, well, you can just park in the grass over there, and then it becomes a habit,
Yep. Mhm.
it's not really allowed. I mean, you can have reserve parking to minimize your asphalt. I mean, you could have, impervious surface, like was discussed, but you can't, we'll just keep parking on the grass. And before you know it, you get any parking you put on there, you have to deal with the stormwater management aspect of it. For anything that runs off from the vehicle,
Right.
has to be captured. So it's all part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, well,
some
we've
moving parts
obviously,
here, it
we've had discussions with Hancock on stormwater management, and I understand that it has to be addressed. I also know with the amount of coverage we anticipate here, that in having lived on the property much of my life, and, I sit next door right in that building there most of the week, no water ever leaves the property. We had 3 inches of rain, and the low point, there was a puddle 6 inches wide, 6 feet wide. But,
Yeah, it's
I
not
understand
just-
we have to have something
It's not
to
just the
satisfy
stormwater,
it.
it's whatever might come off a vehicle, like oil or
Yeah,
contaminants, and those all have to be separated. So that's part of what you're dealing with
Yeah.
managing. from
yeah,
the
no,
cars.
we've had long discussions with the woman from Hancock on this, and,
Yeah.
yeah, so.
Gotcha.
And
I
as
guess
far
with respect
as-
to the sort of the question about the noise or wall, would you be?
Yeah, so we do expect to start adding some vegetative screening. We want, you couldn't even see the house before because it was all overgrown. So we do want people to be able to catch some glimpses of the house, but obviously if you're having an outdoor event there, we would like it to not seem like you're in the middle of a clover leaf, which is what you are. And amazingly, if you stand over by the Putnam House, it's screened with a hedge. You really don't know you're on a main road. So we'd like to try to
Sure.
to do that for the rest of the property.
Okay.
And do it in a, I think you can tell from the way we landscape now that whatever we do is people are going to be happy with, yeah.
That's good to know. So, sounds good. Anything else? Do you, any of your other, and do you have any things you want to add, or? No, we just let him do all the Okay. Okay. All right, well, thank you for coming and giving us the preview on this, and we look forward to hearing and seeing more. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So our next item here, and this is a continuation of the public hearing with respect to the subdivision rules and regulations, discussion of new planning board rules and regulations governing the subdivision of land in Danvers, Massachusetts. And Josh, it's my understanding, I know we've had this, we've heard this once before, and we are, and it's my understanding that we would not be anticipating a vote tonight because, is it correct that town council is still reviewing some aspects of this, or is that?
Yes, that's correct.
I know we had a few questions after the last meeting
Right.
too, specifically I think in terms of the cul-de-sac / dead-end streets
Right.
issue as well.
So,
So you want to add a few things in terms of where we are? So you said
Yeah,
town
so-
council's still in the process of reviewing, so,
yeah. I'm sorry, I'm trying to just talk and look for something at the same time. I apologize. So, yes, the document that was in the packet was kind of updated and like cleaned up. We internally had a bunch of questions and comments, just planning and engineering staff. And it was sent to town council, and we would recommend, or we would like to have them give their kind of.
can you speak close to the
Yep,
microphone?
we would like to have their kind of overall, their blessing or their review before we make our official vote. I know that from our last conversation, that probably the biggest kind of policy question item unresolved was the item about the dead end streets or the cul-de-sacs. One of what we as staff, or what we were looking for the board tonight, is sort of a narrowing in on that policy question about the cul-de-sac. I was trying to find it in here so I could show it on the board. But essentially,
I think this is in the subdivision, this is the proposal. I think you we have a Word version that's in our packet. I think it's starting at page 42,
okay,
which has different options.
it was hidden from me, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was just going to show it on the screen. So
Okay,
that's what I was
great.
trying to do. So,
So we're not voting on the full subdivision, but you do need
we do need like a policy direction from the board on this particular item.
so done via a
Because
vote.
we would like to, if town council is able to review it, but before our next meeting, our goal we would really like to have the board vote on the final language at our next meeting on December 10th.
Okay.
But in front of us tonight, in the document, we are providing basically three options regarding the prohibition on dead-end streets or cul-de-sacs. The first being, we just keep the identical language that we currently have in our 1979
Right.
subdivision regs, where,
So they're
limited to-
allowed up to a length of 600 feet.
and then anything for a greater length requires a waiver.
Okay.
We threw in as staff two other potential options. One is sort of the compromise, option in lowering that number down from 600 to 300. And then the other option, which was proposed at the last meeting, is the prohibition of dead-end streets. One just point of clarification that probably was not articulated or highlighted well enough, or should have, is even with the proposal to prohibit dead-end streets, a developer and or applicant would still have the opportunity to waive that prohibition and could still, construct a subdivision with a cul-de-sac. So it wouldn't obstruct that from ever, that option of building a dead-end street was never completely off the table. It just required a waiver. So I hope that is clearer now. But
And I asked this for in terms of clarification in other communities.
yeah, so there are several communities in Mass that have adopted in their subdivision rules and regs that basically on the sheet, that third option, which would prohibit dead-end streets except with the use of a waiver. So just some examples, just towns, community, whatever. Attleboro, Weston, Winchester, Dover, Westminster, Somerville. And something similar is Middleton. Middleton's limit is 500. So just for a point of reference. So
I see. So Middleton, what they did is they didn't so they kind of did more like what the
exactly right.
sort of so it's not so it's lessened.
Exactly. So
In the communities, have they used the ones that have prohibited the dead end streets? Has the waiver been done?
yeah. So just because Brian Zakelli had worked in Winchester for almost a decade, his experience was they had in 2011 voted to get rid of or prohibit cul-de-sacs with the waiver requirement. And in his time there were at least 2 subdivisions that were built that were granted the waiver, and the subdivisions that were built were with cul-de-sacs or were with dead-end streets. So
Okay, got it.
those are just some examples of communities in the Commonwealth that have done something similar that we're proposing to do. Clearly, from our meeting, there was different opinions on this matter, so we thought that it might be beneficial to kind of talk through some options. So
I think putting together the options is good. So let's come back here to let's talk about it in terms of what the in terms of what folks' thoughts are. But I guess both in terms of this specific as well as also if there are any other areas of the subdivision rules and regs. Jim, did you want to?
Yeah, I think my position's pretty clear on that. I don't think we should change that rule on the cul-de-sacs. I think I've been on the board since the late 90s, and all we've had is cul-de-sacs. Can't remember a subdivision that connected. I'd be happy to be educated if I'm wrong. But the town really does not have much left in developable land, and if we're looking to encourage development, and we've had a lot of meetings and community-based meetings and grants and state legislation to encourage more housing in town and towns in Massachusetts. To limit that, I think, is not in concert with that. A policy is one thing, but a rule is another. And I don't see anything wrong with the cul-de-sacs that have been built in town. I think they're good developments. They do provide dead-end streets, granted, but it creates a neighborhood. You don't have cars passing through there per se. I don't think the fire department excuse or the water main stubbing is something that I think it's a pretty weak argument. So I propose no change. I don't think 300 feet, it's even shorter. It's something that, it's worked. It hasn't been a problem in town that I can say. I mean, people have built these developments and they've been successful, and I think they've built, nice neighborhoods, and we've regulated them throughout. So to make this a firm rule, I mean, while maybe in the background it might be a policy thing that staff may recommend, but I don't see why we should do it at this point. If we were just starting out in 1950 developing this town, that might be a different story, but the town is pretty much developed. You've got a few sites you can maybe develop or reuse, but there's not a lot that's going to change. So that's it.
Okay.
Me.
Sounds good. Mike, any thoughts on this?
I mainly echo what Jim has to say. I think that if we could have done this a long time ago, it may have been beneficial. I live in an area where it's a lot more all connected and walkable downtown, and it's great, but I just think if we're trying to provide more housing for people and there's not a lot of space left, then I don't really know how we do it. So kind of the same thing Jim said. I'm not opposed to a different idea if I understand it and see a reason that gets explained, but the reasons that have been explained to me at this point, I just think that it doesn't do it for me, I guess, so far. So that's kind of where I stand.
Okay. Jean?
Yeah, so I guess there, like you said, there's not a lot of land left to develop. I know we did just change a lot of the zoning for the MBTA communities, so there are places where development could happen. And I don't necessarily think that cul-de-sacs are best practice, even though they've been going on in this town for a long time. I honestly would rather see the open areas stay open and have the development be where we designated it. But I don't think even if we pass this, that people aren't going to come in here and just ask for a waiver. So I don't think it really makes a difference.
Tim, your thoughts?
Yeah, I generally agree with Gene's last point, because if I understand correctly, any of the proposed language you could just get a waiver from regardless. So, I mean, I think we've all shared our opinions on, encouraging more development, wanting more housing, not wanting to cut off one potential way to develop and create more housing. But if you can get a waiver from any of these, I don't think I have a very strong preference one way or the other. I do think I do actually tend to prefer the more generic language of no subdivision, but you can ask for a waiver, because then given we're trying to write language now that will cover so few plots that probably have some weird design considerations already. I'd almost prefer they always come in front of us so we can just take each case by case, rather than trying to say 300 feet arbitrarily. Like, I have no idea if that's the right number. So yeah, I do tend to prefer proposed language number 2, with sort of the understanding that we're all sitting here saying we want those types of development. We just rather, not set us up for dead-end streets that could be avoided, or designs of dead-end streets that might exacerbate the considerations for like dead-end water mains or really narrow entries with lots of trees or something like that could create access issues. So
then you are in favor of the proposal language number 2? Is that what you're saying, Tim?
yeah, I mean, if you can get a waiver regardless of what the language is, the ones that prescribe a certain width or length seem overly precise, considering how few lots will actually probably be considered here. Like, I have no idea if these are the right numbers. I would much rather just see each dead end come in front of us, consider it on a case-by-case basis. Because what we're talking about here is, a subdivision, again, with so few plots, like, can you avoid this? Can you go wider and longer? Or, I could just see a lot of different, just reiterate what I said, that I'd rather see each case by case rather than try to prescribe some arbitrary number that I'm not in a position to say is right for all the lots that are left.
Sure. Okay.
Can I just comment on, just to clarify, I mean, a lot of the subdivisions that came in, they weren't all 600 feet, some were longer, and they needed to get a waiver from that 600-foot rule. Typically, that happened. But getting a waiver is not guaranteed. Getting a waiver means the board has to vote on that. So if someone's sick that particular night and doesn't make the meeting, and they're looking for a vote, they have to get a 3-to-1 vote. So it's not a guarantee. So why are we making an impediment, you know, to be able to do the subdivision?
You would
it's not a
still,
subdivision.
maybe
I'm
a
sorry.
question for my understanding, you would still need approval for the subdivision, period, regardless of whether the waiver was there, right?
Well, if we did the new language that says no cul-de-sacs, then to come in and say we want to do a cul-de-sac, we need a waiver from the rule.
Right.
I think that's a harder ask.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Versus,
Yeah, I'd agree.
hey, we've got an 800-foot street, which we've had in Danvers, and we need a waiver from the rule that says it has to be 600 feet, which has happened quite a bit. But it's different if you're asking, if it's a clear rule, and it may not be us sitting on this board, it could be, I mean, let's face it, it took, what, 1979?
Yeah, it's a long time.
to now, to change these rules.
Let me ask a thought experiment then. So someone comes in with a dead-end street that is 500 feet, current rule 600 feet. But it's very obvious they could have designed it such that it would connect and it wouldn't be a dead-end street. Do we have the authority right now to say no to the dead-end street because we would prefer a design that connects?
I don't believe so, no.
I don't think we can,
Right.
not on that basis, I think.
Right.
Right.
But
so
I think if you did that, though, think about it. If you have a cul-de-sac, because to do the cul-de-sac, you got to make that big turning circle.
Mhm.
So you're eating up part of your lots. But if you make the street connect to the next street, you're probably going to lose 2 of your lots.
yeah, I mean, I was just thinking through in terms of, I mean, I don't have a very strong preference between any one of these three. I think we're all pretty aligned on we would prefer it to connect. We don't want to get rid of dead-end streets, period. So how do we encourage the behavior of prefer one versus the
I haven't
other?
spoken yet, but yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Lou. Everyone who hasn't spoken yet.
Well, in my experience working for, on this for years, and I also work with builders and developers, just telling you, if someone is putting in a 600-foot long street cul-de-sac, that's going to cost them over $1 million to put that in. So they want to maximize the number of lots that they can get. If someone says, hey, you're going to get 8 houses, but now you're only going to get 6. So now it might not be built, because that $1 million that they're going to expend is for the infrastructure. It's for the plumbing. It's for the underground utilities. It's for the lights. They're going to spend in excess of $1 million for that. And now we're going to tell them, okay, could you lose 2 lots and still make money? I don't know. It's so costly now. It's really, really costly. And I think the engineers on the board can agree with me. I mean, just the plans, just to plan this, just to build it is extremely expensive.
Okay. I mean, my thoughts in terms of this. I mean, I understand the engineering considerations, and but I also I appreciate the sort of the connectivity piece of this. I mean, this is something when I was, in terms of the, I think improved connectivity, I think is a pro for not having. Again, this is the way I look at it too is I was interested at our last meeting in knowing what other communities have done, as well as knowing to the extent that it can be waived. And I understand that a waiver is not, it's a waiver. It's not as a matter of right. And so it might be a big ask, and a waiver can be declined. But in terms of I think in terms of a policy from the town, I think the sort of, if you're looking at sort of I think the modern planning perspective, and I understand that we've had a long track history in Danvers, and we're not in 1950, so I get it. But I see at least from a policy perspective of that cul-de-sacs. I know. I mean, you potentially would have less houses, but you would have less maybe large single-family homes built. So I see, and again, I didn't grow up on a cul-de-sac. I grew up on Water Street, which is certainly, no one would confuse that with being a cul-de-sac. And I live in we live in a 1920s house, which has through streets running through. So But I think the increased connectivity, I think that is certainly helpful. Understanding that there's a limited amount of property left in Danvers, I understand that, but also there's going to be, over time, I mean, you're going to have infill as well. I mean, you're going to have properties which are previously occupied, which may end up being taken down. Even what you see on North Street, I mean, that was previously a property. So, which ended up, it was a much larger parcel, and now it got broken up. So, anyway, the way I look at it is because there is the ability to get a waiver, I would be in favor of the option, of the proposal 2. So again, that's my, that's my 2 cents. So, okay. So, this is a public hearing, but any other further comments from the members of the board before I get comments? No? Okay. Yep. Mr. Bradstreet.
Again, Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. I believe there are several pieces of property in town that the town has an easement on so that they can do what they have to do. Is an easement a possibility to connect the services? I think you said something about the fire department doesn't like dead-end stubs, they like through. Could that be an option? Perhaps an easement to have the loop, but not so that they were satisfied.
So like crossing over?
Right, as opposed to a stub because the street's so long, which you don't want, but the fire department doesn't like stubs. If you got another street or a cul-de-sac, can't you put in an easement so that water has to flow around? Just an easement so it can't be built on, but you still get what you want for service.
Okay.
I'm just asking.
I'm not sure about the answer to that.
Yeah,
Is that
typically, I
something
mean,
to
if you're going to put an easement, so you're the abutter to this new development. So now the developer's going to ask you, hey, do you mind if I put a water line through your property? And it's going to be a 20-foot wide easement. You can't park any vehicles on it. You can't put any structures on it because if it has a problem, we got to go in and we got to dig it up.
It's just a thought.
Yeah, it's just that anyone, you as the landowner next door is going to say, sure, I'll let you do that. Give me $100,000, and
What are the options? I mean,
yeah,
what
but
is
also
going to be and not be required?
yeah.
That's why
I
I'm
mean,
just
it's a
asking.
little unique. It's a little unique in that sense, but it's probably within the realm of possibility. Has it been done? It may have been done, maybe on a smaller scale, but on a newer scale, bigger, it's an idea.
And I know I believe you brought up the fact that someone's developing property and it would increase the cost to develop the property the way they would like to, not with, say, the town would like it developed. It's the cost of doing business. Either don't do it or do it if you choose not to do it. Maybe there is another developer who will see the benefit of doing it so that he can recoup his cost. I don't know how long when you talk about recouping costs. 5 years, 10 years, a decade?
Well, no. I mean, if you can only put 30,000 square foot lots, right? You're in Residence 3, and you've got like the McGilvey property, for example, right? So you got 9 acres there that were developed. There were some on the street. There were A&R lots on the street that, cookie cutter. You have your lots, you have your frontage on the street. But in the back, you've got 6 lots, okay, and you can, divvy them up accordingly. One's kind of a pork chop lot 2, to narrow in the front and then gets bigger in the back. So you end up with, and then on top of that, you've got this big, huge detention pond that sits there, excuse me, and occupies space because you've got some wetlands and you've got some runoffs that you have to deal with. So all that factored in. If you took that same subdivision and said, let's connect that to North Street, you would lose a lot on North Street because you had to put the road through there, right? And that would have, so now you've just lost a $500,000 land sale. Is it still going to be profitable to that, and you've added some additional costs? Maybe, maybe not. It's maybe on a case-by-case basis. Maybe you lose, not only would you lose the lot potentially on North Street, but another lot on Chatham Way. So you could lose 2 lots. And what I'm saying is, when developers look at projects, they decide, what are my costs going to be? Right now, you're probably looking at, I don't know, $350 a square foot to build something. On top of that, you've got all this infrastructure costs that you have to factor in. So if we don't want the project developed, if we cut it down so small that you're only going to get a few lots or a few units out of it, like the problem we were having with downtown, by a comparison, people aren't building out other than the Danvers hardware spot, which, we'll see what happens there, if someone's actually going to buy it, or Mr. Hernandez is going to build it, which I'm not sure if he is. You have the zoning that's very complicated, that's very costly, because you're paying WUMP fees, you're paying, fees to Danvers Housing and Trust. And so it gets to a point that maybe I'm not going to develop because it's too expensive.
Well, can you always seek a waiver, though?
A waiver of those costs? No.
Not a waiver of the cost, but if you're not able to, of losing that property, of losing that one lot you mentioned, like, for example, North Street, McGillivray, is that a case where, you would present it, you'd seek out a waiver?
Right, but a waiver's not guaranteed. So we're making an obstacle now where we only have so many parcels left. We're putting an impediment now to make it harder to develop those parcels.
Jim, how long was that? Did they have to come in for a waiver anyway because it was over 600 feet?
I can't remember.
I forget.
Can't remember.
It might be, but it's something, I don't think it's much more than 600.
Yeah, no, I was just curious.
I think it's close.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It might have been by right, to
Yeah.
the 600.
I guess to your point, Jim, about that area there on North Street, I don't see as much of a benefit as connecting it because it's not like it's a walkable area. The cul-de-sac feels like more of a benefit to that area. But I do think if there were, it's not a blanket statement because I'm sure there's areas that if they did connect, they may be better. So it's really hard. So that's why, to Tim's point, it's like, okay, well, would we rather see them or do we rather not? That's why I'm I see both sides of the fence, honestly. So that's why I'm curious. That's why I was asking the question about the 600 feet.
Okay. Gotcha.
But everything has to come in front of us now. We all have to deal with and like I said, that's really all we've seen. And I don't know, other than maybe a development like the Carmelite, that's going to be much more acreage.
Right.
And you're going to have 3 cities involved, 3 towns involved. So there's going to be connectivity, whether you're exiting through Peabody or Salem or Danvers. So it's a little different animal. Maybe you end up with some fingers based on wetlands, based upon where there are cul-de-sacs that you end up with. I don't know. I haven't seen
Do
the
you
plans
feel like
on
with
that.
your time on the board that there's cul-de-sacs that got approved that could have been connected? I know that's kind of like digging deep in your brain, but is there could we have?
I don't think so because
No.
again, remember this town was in the 50s with the GI Bill. You got Woodvale being developed. You got everything on a grid, right? So you got all these grids like Back Bay. That was
Oh, yeah.
before that.
I live on a grid.
Right. So it's all a grid. But then as you expand out into North Street and those areas, you do end up, you have the main roads, but just by virtue of whether you have wetlands problems or you have, a lot of the newer developments just end up that way because you're not going to be able to cut through you'd have to buy the house on the connecting street to get through. It's just not possible.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it can be a policy. That's something that, but I don't know if you want to make it a restriction.
Right.
By making it a rule, it becomes a restriction, and it's not something guaranteed. It might be like, hey, this is a great plan, but for whatever reason, we don't want to vote on it, and this land does not get developed. And so now, if I'm a developer, I'm concerned that should I spend all this money? I mean, just to do plans, just to do your, permitting, you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're going to go into town planning board hoping that they're going to vote to waive that requirement for you, where before it's always been by right.
Yep.
So are you going to invest all that money with the possibility that they say no?
I think it comes down to to a policy. I mean, I think that's
You know,
it. So, yeah, okay.
It's,
Are you, we have, Nova has a question as well.
I'm just talking, it's a long-term investment. It's not a bill that comes in, does something, and 10 years down the road, everything's changed. The town has grown. We dealt with Woodvale and other developments. It's a step-by-step. We don't have a crystal ball, what's going to happen down the street. I'm not anti-development. There are developers out there. Some will want to make a fast buck. Some are interested in developments that will last and be acceptable, not just today, but down the line. Again, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't think developers do, but I'd like to think that we're trying to look after what is in the best interest of Danvers, not the developer. Because they can't develop this spot, they'll find another spot, or they'll go someplace else, and another developer might show up who feels he can do what we're looking for to make the town serviceable. We can't house everybody. We certainly can house a lot of people in town, but I think there are limits. I mean, I don't know. I'm not trying to argue with you. It's just, I'm not on the board. It's just an observation I have. I won't go into it because I don't want to get into politics. Thank you.
Thank you. Nope.
I think Mr. Bradshaw should get an application for associate member. Josh, can you work on that? I mean, he's at every meeting anyway.
That's a good point. We can we nominate? Right? He's an observer, he says. Okay.
Nova Salmonade, town meeting member, precinct 1.
Yes.
I generally agree with like what Jean and Tim said, that ideally, yes, proposed language 2, because yes, there is a waiver available. And no, it's not guaranteed. That's the point. That it's not guaranteed, that if it doesn't make sense for that project, then no, you don't get the waiver. And just because it's something that the town has done over the past doesn't mean that's what we continue to do. This is where we get to correct mistakes. And not continue on a path that we don't think is sustainable anymore. And I totally agree that when you have streets that are connected, it actually includes them in the town. And yes, you don't have just like 5,000 square feet houses, which is not really considered adding housing. I mean, it does, but, kinda. We want these developments to be part of the town, not just little. They have their little neighborhood, and there's 10 people that live down there, and no one sees them, and no one. So I like the idea of the connectivity and different types of housing, and maybe some smaller houses. Maybe they don't all have to be giant. And I know it's very expensive. I get it. I have been here when developers talk about and I understand. But there's a line, and we'll see that line, and like whether or not it's worth it to them. We can't just bend over backwards for whatever they want because they need to make a ton of money or whatever it is they want to do. It's up to us also. So I think having proposed language 2 is perfect because, yes, they do have to come before you. But right now you say they have to come before you anyway, but they still have some things that they can just do automatically. Like you can't say no to a 600-foot thing right now, right? Like if someone wants to that's just a given. So I think this way, yeah, you can give them a waiver. But if it doesn't make sense, you don't. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other further comments on this? So Josh, do you need now we have, there are three options, so.
You can take out number 1, right?
What's that?
We can take out proposed language number 1 since none of us seem to.
So I guess the question is, I assume you need a motion from us.
Sure, and it might make sense, just each individual one, or
Okay,
figure
I mean,
it out.
I can't make a motion,
Sure.
but I can entertain a
Yep.
motion.
You want a roll call vote? What are you asking for?
Does either or, I just need an indication from the board. I don't have a strong preference if it's a roll call or a motion, like an official vote for each one.
I can't take it.
Yeah, you can
But,
say it. Yeah. there's existing, we have existing, there was proposed language number 1 and proposed language number 2.
Right.
So we can, I mean, I can entertain a motion, someone can move.
Right.
Yeah, I move that we approve the existing language with no change.
Okay, so that motion has been made, and so let's have is there a second to that? Is there a second to that motion?
Can I understand? So we are approving what we want to move forward to, then vote to approve in the next meeting.
Yeah, the language, whatever we approve tonight will,
So this
Yes.
is just
Right.
to get a sense of which version we
Yes.
want, and then we'll approve the whole thing.
Yes.
next
Right,
time.
because this will
Exactly.
need to go to, ultimately, it does need to go to town council to review everything, and I
Yep.
think they want the
Yep.
direction on this
Yes.
piece.
that's right.
Okay.
So Tim, yes, you were, to confirm, you're correct.
Thank
So a
you.
motion has been made. Is there a second on the existing language? Okay. All right. All right, there's no motion.
Motion fails.
Motion fails. Okay, thank you. All right, I'd entertain a motion as to another of these.
I make a motion, we move forward with proposed language number 2.
Okay, there's a motion for proposed language number 2. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. So this is the proposed language number 2. Just to read it again. No subdivision shall be approved which contains dead-end streets. A waiver may be applied for this provision and may be granted if there's a determination by the planning board that the waiver is in the public interest and not inconsistent with the intent and purpose of the subdivision control law and of these regulations. Is there any discussion on this motion? Okay. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
I'm still on the fence. Do I have to vote on one either way, or do I, like, what's the ruling on that?
Yeah, you do have to, it's been moved and seconded, so
You could abstain or
you could, yeah.
abstain or recuse, but
I honestly don't know how I feel, so I'm going to abstain on this, if that's okay. Is that allowed, or am I?
I think that's
You
fine.
can, it's a motion. You can do as you wish.
Okay.
Okay, so the motion then,
So
so
then,
it's a 2 to,
no, it was 3-1-1.
Yeah.
Right. Tim, that's, you were an aye.
Correct.
Tim was
So-
aye. Lou is aye.
Gene was an aye.
Dean's an aye. 3-1-1.
Right.
Okay,
So it would,
the motion passes.
Yep.
So that's proposed language number 2. Okay. All right, so that's going to go then,
that language will be added, will be incorporated into the final that will be sent around and to everyone. And
okay?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Is that okay? Yeah, Josh, I know we're going to look at this for the next meeting, but is there an easy way to see like recent subdivisions that have been passed for my own studying knowledge before I come back to the next meeting?
yeah, I could send you like plans or just applications from the past 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, honestly, if I can just see where they are so I can kind of look at them and
Yeah.
do my own.
Yeah, I could send
Due
you around.
diligence.
Not tomorrow, but
No,
On Monday,
in the
yeah.
next week or so
Yeah.
is fine.
you just want to know like the past 5
Yeah, that'd be great.
applications.
Yeah.
I could send you the plans or like where they are, so
Even
you
the
could drive
street
around.
name. The street name is fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Sounds good. Anything further on the subdivision rules and regulations? Because we will need to move to continue this we'll move to continue the public hearing to our next board meeting on the 10th of December. Any further comments or remarks on that? Okay, hearing none, can I entertain a motion to continue the public hearing to the next planning board meeting of December 10th?
So moved.
Okay, it's moved by Jean. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Mike. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None? Okay. Motion, the public hearing is continued. Next item are minutes. I believe we have minutes from I think it was the September 24th meeting.
move to accept.
Okay, Jim moves to accept the minutes as prepared. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Tim. Okay, any discussion on that? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Okay. Next, next meeting, Josh?
Yep, it's on Tuesday, December 10th,
Okay.
here at 7. I think it's going to be a quick update on the Trask Lane item that was continued from our previous meeting. The subdivision rules and regs, which we just continued, and then the public hearing opening for the zoning amendments for the February town meeting, February 2025 town meeting.
Okay.
And potentially signage, I assume.
What's that?
And potentially the signage.
And potentially signage.
Okay. Got it. And just so you folks are aware, I think I mentioned this at our previous meeting, December 10th meeting, I will be out of the country, so we will not be, I'll not be able to participate. But then, and so I asked Jean as clerk to serve as acting chair, and I asked Tim to serve as acting clerk in my absence. Everybody else will be able to attend?
Yes.
Okay.
I just had a question on that. So we're just going to get an update. We're not going to be
On Trask.
on
Which one?
track.
Yeah, yeah,
I think it was just an update because we weren't going to have a vote
yeah.
because of my, because I think it was explained at the last meeting that I was going to be absent.
Right. So my one question I had is, I know this evening even though we have these kind of informal staff items and you're allowing public comment, I would like to have public comment by the Trask. I can tell you I've gotten a lot of calls about it. I've gotten calls from residents. I've gotten calls from people in Beverly.
Yeah, no,
And
they could,
is there, why would there be a prohibition from that? Because I think it's
No.
going to be helpful.
I guess I'm not unclear. What do you mean?
Well, at the
prohibition?
last meeting, public comment was not allowed on Trask Lane.
It was, I don't remember.
Not at all. And we had a full, all the people.
Not allowed? I
Not
mean,
allowed.
it's not a public hearing. It's not a public hearing.
It's the chair's discretion to as to whether or not to
Right.
allow public
Oh,
comment.
so is that your is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm wondering why, and also I think it would be helpful because again, there's a lot of emotions.
Sure.
And there's a lot of residents that came out.
Yeah, yeah.
And I got a call from a person who was on a board in Beverly,
Sure.
and I think there should be public comment,
Mhm.
and I think it would be helpful for our decision making. And I think that there are alternatives to their proposal, and when you only get one side,
Mhm.
and you get an engineer or a traffic study person telling you one thing, that doesn't give you. I know we're getting our own traffic study,
Yeah.
which is helpful,
Right.
Okay.
but I think the people that live there and experience on a daily basis what it is now,
Mhm.
and then anticipating what it's going to compound to
Sure.
with, they're saying 2,000 trips. It could be 4,000 trips. We don't know. I mean, everybody drives today. Everyone takes their own car. Nobody carpools. Nobody, and you've got kids and you're going to take the kid to practice. I mean, that's a destination. There's no way out other than going in and out of that one egress. So that's a concern. And I think we owe it to the citizens of Danvers, especially who live in that neighborhood, to be able to at least have their peace and give them time to comment, and maybe not at the 10th, but at the meeting after that. And and I think we should let them know, because if they all try to come to that meeting and we're not really going to talk about it.
Yeah. So I guess where I sit, I guess referring to our last meeting, because it was a preliminary conversation. I mean, I think we were just viewed it as a very preliminary conversation, which is why we know that there is going to be a significant amount of public interest in it. I think that first meeting, we were just trying to have a preliminary conversation. It wasn't necessarily to prohibit
I mean, we weren't making a decision at that moment, but I understand Jim's point.
Yeah,
I understand
for sure.
It's a point well taken, and I appreciate, and that's something also in terms of the way we, have meetings. If that's something, there's, we're during the course of a meeting, if a member feels also that that the chair should entertain public comment on it, you could certainly suggest it as well, and I can.
I also don't remember,
entertain
just
it.
don't want to get into too much. I don't remember there were many people from the public. Did a lot of people from the public want to go to the podium, and we said no? I don't remember even
No
doing
one
that.
raised their hand.
No, I
or-
think
Oh, okay.
Lou said it right at the outset.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
That they couldn't.
Oh.
And I think they might have been a little disappointed in that.
Sure.
Okay. Well, I think I know that it was not a public hearing.
Right.
And
I don't
so-
remember it being like no. I don't remember any comment. There are no public comments.
No, but I understand his point.
Similarly tonight, those two other items, they weren't public hearings, but we still, allowed.
It's our hand raised, and I
So-
entertained it.
That there had to be 20-plus neighbors.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Going forward, I think that there's a strong likelihood that we will obviously hear from the public in some manner. So,
Well, I think it's good to be, if you tell them to pick an ombudsman, we don't want 40 people coming to the mic, maybe 3 or 4 talking on different subjects so that it's clear, this person's going to talk about traffic, this person's going to talk about, different subjects. So I think it's helpful if they have one person or two in the neighborhood that
Sure.
maybe have reached out to you. I know there's some written comment and there's this.
yeah, there was if the public had called me that day or emailed me and said, hey, am I going to be able to talk tonight? I probably would have said, tonight might not be the night, like the specific night, but
Yeah.
obviously if you want, I would say on the phone, obviously feel free to attend, be informed, come.
Yeah.
We will likely have an opportunity to talk at, at one of the future
yeah.
meetings.
For purpose of even for purpose of agenda planning and such, is there something, because I know sometimes it doesn't, you'll see something that doesn't indicate that it's a public hearing.
Right.
But, people will come and they want to, is there a note that you can do on the agenda that says this is not a public hearing, however, public comment, can be entertained, the chair can entertain public comment or something like that, that indicates that
We could talk through some language that we could potentially add to the
if someone
agenda.
wants to, frankly, if someone wants to raise their hand and be recognized, they can comment.
Sure. Yeah, we
Even
could.
with the rules, we're doing the rules over. I mean, I know at one point we would allow on the agenda
Mhm.
someone to come up, if they weren't on the agenda, to ask a question or present something. We used to have a time,
You used to have,
Public
you
business
used to
they
have,
have,
you
like at
used to
the-
have
at the
citizens'
select
time
board?
or
yeah,
new business or some.
exactly. There wasn't an application, but
Right.
it was a
Yeah,
Right.
gotcha.
way to access the board, and not necessarily make
Right.
them wait till 11 o'clock.
Right.
We'll give you 5 minutes. Like not or anything, but the informal one tonight,
hmm
you got to give them a time period
Mhm.
because they're taking time from the board and they might never come back. I mean, it's a presentation, so we're doing them a favor. They haven't paid any application fees. Obviously, they had a plan done.
Right.
And I'm all for historical
Yeah.
buildings and all that, but I'm just saying, typically, we're like, okay, we're going to give it 15 minutes.
Sure.
Because
Yeah, no. I mean, everyone's
tonight we
time.
didn't have a lot of things. If we had a lot on the agenda,
Well, that's why
you
yeah.
just got to be.
Yeah,
there's a lot of moving parts to all of these things. But I'm hearing what you were saying.
No, I think those are fair points.
Yeah.
Just real quick on that topic,
Yeah.
did we get any update from the town lawyer or attorney or whatever I forget the name of the gentleman, but on like what we actually have that we
Yeah.
can do?
For Trask.
Yeah.
We
I
should
don't
kind
want
of be careful talking about this since it wasn't on the agenda tonight. We probably
Okay. We
dove
can
too
just hold
hard.
off. That's fine.
But I believe
He's
that they.
just asking for a status, and so you don't have to,
I think that they will be attending future meetings.
will we get an update on what we can actually vote yay or nay on at that point?
Yeah, there
or-
probably will be a memo of some type, and
Okay.
or they're present, or they will attend the meeting, so you could ask the person in
Okay.
person.
Thank you.
And although although I will not be attending the December 10th meeting, I'll make sure to watch
Yep.
I'll watch the video, and so do the Mullins thing, so I'll be able to participate in if anything, that continues on from there.
Yep.
In Lou, you not being here, in terms of what we just looked at with the language with the dead-end streets, how does that affect the voting for that, or does it at all?
That because of the 3-1 vote, language will be incorporated, so it won't matter.
But we're not voting the next time to move that,
We're voting on the final language, I guess, at the next meeting.
right, that Lou won't be here for,
Yes.
right? Okay, all right, just clarifying. Thank you.
And just backing up for 1 second, because you said that the town attorney might either attend or send a memo.
It might be an and/or. It might be an and/or.
Yeah, I'd strongly prefer a memo ahead of time just to be able to be prepared to the extent that's something we can ask for.
Yeah, I think that's a good.
I think the way we teed it up, and I don't want to get. You should just be careful again because it's not on the agenda. That more robust conversation on that item will be on the January 14th meeting than the December
Right.
10th.
So are we going to vote on the subdivision rules next meeting?
Yes. Or we're trying to. That's the goal.
So just for conversation, you need a majority vote on that, and you're only going to have 4 members.
Right. That's correct.
Okay.
All right. Anything further at all?
I have one minor little comment. I was driving up Route 1 North today. We've approved a lot of car dealerships recently. Great. Kia, they built it extremely fast. Good for them. The parking lot was overflowing. They were parking in the grass. They're like absolutely everywhere. So we keep hearing this story of, oh, the parking regulations are too high. That's not how people buy cars anymore. And we've heard that and approved that 3 times. I think we should be a little bit more critical moving
Tim, were
forward.
those Kia cars or customer?
Yeah.
Or you don't know?
I was driving on the
Unclear.
highway in the rain,
would-
so I didn't look at
would-
it.
Yeah, yeah.
I would
Could you
ass-
stop next
I
time?
would
Yeah,
assume.
yeah.
I would assume honestly it's inventory, to be honest. Just
It's what?
because
I saw some, I saw enough cars all over the place that we should just be a little bit more skeptical, is all I'm saying.
Well, Ford's doing the same thing behind the mall.
I've heard that. That's why I bring
There's
it up.
probably 100 cars on the grass now.
Our office
So-
is
Yeah,
became aware of that item. Yes.
I think we need to,
Yep.
regulate.
All right. Anything further? I can entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Happy
opposed?
Thanksgiving.
None. Have a great Thanksgiving, everybody.
So-